Welcome back. Mindy and I have been rehashing the 2008 election, especially here in Missouri. Someone who's been there every step of the way is St. Louis Post-Dispatch political reporter Jo Mannies. Jo, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for asking me.
Well, glad to have you back.
Yeah, it's good. Jo, you know, for those of us that are political junkies, the paper is secondary to the political fix, where we check all the time. And I know that even as we're taping the show, there's some interesting news breaking. You're breaking on the political fix about Senator Claire McCaskill and what she might be doing after what can only be described as a successful, partnership with President-elect Obama. She's been one of the early and strong supporters of his. What have you heard?
Well, she's definitely going to be the new kingmaker in Missouri when there's a Democratic president with Obama. So just as Bond during the Bush years, U.S. Attorney, some of the other key major posts, it was Bond. Now it's all going to go through McCaskill. Well, the Huffington Post had an interesting piece this morning. They were hearing some talk out of D.C. that she is being touted as a possible replacement for Howard Dean as Democratic National Committee Chairman. Dean is stepping down in January. The president of the party, in this case Obama, generally controls who is head of the DNC. And so there's talk of splitting it into two roles, which is not unusual. And basically, one of his top campaign people would be the actual operational chairman, but McCaskill would be the basically the public face. She'd be on the talk shows and all that stuff. And so there's a lot of talk about that, which I thought was extremely intriguing. There's already talk about U.S. Attorney. As you know, on this side of the state, it's Catherine Hanaway, who was appointed under the Bush years, very close to Bond. The assumption is because when it changes parties, usually the U.S. attorneys are all replaced in one fell swoop. And so there's talk that McCaskill will obviously have a role in that. There's already names being bandied about, local Democrats, like even the county prosecutor, Bob McCullough, and some of the others these are just names being floated around. People always do that when there's a change in administration. But it's very interesting to see what a prominent role McCaskill is playing in all this talk.
If she is appointed to some position other than the DNC, she might have to give up her Senate seat, and then what happens?
Then the governor, who would be Nixon, would be appointing a replacement. Now, I doubt that's going to happen. She's been saying pretty public about this, and she's told me this, and she's told other reporters that too, that she really likes the U.S. Senate. It's a great job. You're your own boss. I would be surprised if she would take a position in the Obama administration. There had been some talk floating around a week ago before the election that if he was elected, perhaps she might be in the short list for Attorney General, now that John Edwards kind of crashed and burned with a personal scandal. But again, I will be very surprised if she does that. I think she'll stay in the U.S. Senate.
Jo, let's talk about the state races here in Missouri. We had very interesting, earlier in the show we were talking with Secretary of State Carnahan, kind of amazing things to say out loud. McCain wins by a razor-thin margin. Nixon wins by 18 points. Kinder wins by a point or so. Robin Carnahan gets the most votes ever for anyone in Missouri. I think that's right. Lemke wins in a Democrat district, or maybe he wins. This kind of stuff across the state. Have you ever seen anything like it? What's going on?
Well, I think there was two things going on. This is just my theory here. I think that Obama's ground game was definitely, I think, superior to whatever else the Republicans had. Now, it wasn't enough, to, at least at this point, although we have those 7,000 provisional ballots out, it wasn't enough for Obama to carry the state. But arguably, if they hadn't done it, it might have been a whole different, McCain might have won the state in a walk. But that said, that plus the huge wave for Jay Nixon kind of made, and Nixon was campaigning in a lot of places where Democrats don't always campaign. Nixon portrayed himself very much as a centrist. So I think you had kind of this odd results. And some of it, in fairness, you could attribute to all the late appearances by Sarah Palin, who, the Republican vice presidential nominee, who frankly was the biggest star on the Republican side, and she was the one person who could get big Republican crowds here in Missouri. It was stunning to see the crowds that came out for her in those 3 visits that she did in a course of less than 2 weeks. that were between 12 and 20,000 apiece, depending on where it was. And McCain did one stop in St. Charles, and he gets 3,000. Now, granted, it was difficult to get there, but still, I thought it was rather interesting that after his event, they just sent her in, and it was just her, and she was the magnet.
And she really rallied the base, for sure.
I think she did, and I had Congresswoman Joanne Emerson say the day of the Cape Girardeau appearance that Palin did, which was the Thursday before the election, that she thought that it might bump up the Republican turnout there. And so there's kind of a wave that goes through. We've just now been looking at the township by township reports in St. Louis County. Those just became available within the last day or so. And because I'm trying to get a sense of how in that state Senate race in South County, right now Republican Jim Lemke has a 119 vote margin over Democrat Joan Barry. I want to look at some of those other totals. Was that part of the county that ended up going for McCain, for example?
Right.
Kind of what happened.
Joe, we got to wrap this segment up, unfortunately. I want to ask you, Kit Bond, who's he get as his opponent in 10?
My prediction?
Yeah.
Robin Carnahan.
Great. Well, I figured you might say that, and we just had her on. We didn't get to ask her that question. Thanks again, Joe, for your coverage and for being on our show.
Thanks
Thanks
for
so
being
much
here.
for asking me.
When we return, a few reflections from this election season. You're watching Midwest Talking Points on Charter Communications.